Mary Joseph's hands were steady as she sutured the gunshot wound, but her mind was screaming. The man bleeding on the table wasn't supposed to be here. She wasn't supposed to be here, in an underground medical suite beneath a mansion she'd never heard of, working on a patient whose name she'd never know, for a man who'd bought her future 6 months ago with a single phone call. The patient's pulse strengthened under her fingers. Behind her, Kim Ming exhaled, the first sound he'd made in 40 minutes. "You saved him," Kim said, his voice raw with something between relief and possession. Mary didn't look up from her work. She couldn't, because looking at Kim Ming meant acknowledging the truth. She'd stopped being a nursing student the moment she'd returned his leather portfolio in that hotel 6 months ago. She'd thought it was an act of integrity. She'd been wrong. It had been an audition. 6 months earlier, the story of how Mary Joseph became indebted to the most dangerous man in the city didn't start with blood. It started with $8,000 in cash and a choice she thought was simple. The Grand Meridian Hotel stood like a glass tower against the night sky, its lobby gleaming with marble and money. Mary pushed her cleaning cart down the 15th floor hallway, her blue housekeeping uniform crisp despite the exhaustion that made her bones ache. It was nearly midnight, and she still had 3 more rooms before her shift ended. After that, she'd go home to her cramped studio apartment, sleep for 4 hours, then wake up for her 7 a.m. nursing clinical rotation at City General Hospital. The math of her life was brutal and simple. Rent, tuition, her mother's mounting medical bills for the diabetes that was slowly stealing her vision. Mary worked 60 hours a week between the hotel and a weekend clinic job, and she was still drowning. She was 23 years old and felt 40. Room 1507 was a luxury suite, the kind that cost more per night than Mary made in a week. She knocked twice, waited, then used her master key. The suite was immaculate, which meant the guest had barely used it. Sometimes the wealthiest people left the smallest messes. She moved efficiently through the sitting area, emptying trash bins that contained nothing but a single coffee cup, straightening cushions that hadn't been disturbed. The bedroom was the same. The massive bed barely slept in, the bathroom spotless. Mary was finishing up, checking behind the nightstand for forgotten items, when her hand brushed against something wedged between the furniture and the wall. She pulled it out and her breath caught. It was a leather portfolio, expensive and sleek, the kind of accessory that whispered wealth rather than shouted it. The leather was buttery soft, deep black, with subtle stitching that suggested craftsmanship. Mary knew she should leave it for the front desk, follow protocol, let management handle it. But something made her pause. Maybe it was the weight of it, substantial and important. Maybe it was simple curiosity. She opened it. Inside, organized in neat compartments, were stacks of $100 bills. Mary's hands trembled as she counted. 80 bills. $8,000. More money than she'd seen in her entire life outside of a bank. Enough to pay 3 months of her mother's medication. Enough to cover her upcoming tuition payment without having to choose between eating and studying. Her heart hammered against her ribs. She looked around the empty suite as if someone might be watching. The silence was absolute. Nobody knew she was here. Nobody had seen her find this. She could take it, slip it into her cart under the cleaning supplies, finish her shift, go home. The guest would assume they'd lost it somewhere else, or maybe they wouldn't even notice. People with this kind of money often didn't. Mary's hand hovered over the cash, her fingers actually touching the top bill. She thought about her mother's last doctor's appointment, the way her mom had squinted at the prescription bottles because she couldn't afford new glasses. She thought about her own student loan balance, a number so large it didn't feel real anymore. Then she heard her mother's voice in her head, as clear as if she were standing in the room. Easy money always costs the most, baby girl. You sleep sound when your conscience is clear. Mary closed the portfolio with a sharp snap. Her hands were shaking now, not from temptation but from the aftershock of almost crossing a line she couldn't uncross. She looked through the portfolio more carefully, searching for identification. There was a business card tucked into a side pocket. Matte black, expensive stock, with minimal text. A name in English and Korean characters, Kim Ming. Below it, just a phone number. No company name, no title, no email. Just a name and a way to reach him. She pulled out her personal phone and stared at the number. It was after midnight. Calling seemed intrusive, almost aggressive. But keeping $8,000 of someone else's money was theft, and theft wasn't who she was. Not yet. Not ever. Mary dialed. The phone rang once. Just once. Then a voice answered, smooth and controlled, with a slight Korean accent that made each word sound deliberate. Yes. Not hello. Not who is this. Just yes, as if he'd been expecting the call, as if calls at midnight were perfectly normal. Mr. Kim? Mary's voice sounded smaller than she wanted it to. My name is Mary Joseph. I'm a housekeeper at the Grand Meridian Hotel. I found your portfolio in room 1507. It has cash and your business card inside. The silence that followed lasted 3 heartbeats. Mary could hear her own pulse in her ears. You found it, Kim Ming said slowly, and there was something in his tone Mary couldn't identify. Not surprise exactly. More like confirmation. And you opened it. It wasn't a question, but Mary answered anyway. Yes, sir. I needed to find contact information to return it. But you saw the contents. Yes. Another pause. Most people would have kept it, Miss Joseph. The hotel has no cameras in guest rooms. No one would know. The statement hung between them like a test question, and Mary realized with a cold flush that this was exactly what it was. He was probing her, measuring her response, seeing if she'd lie or justify or make excuses. It's not mine, Mary said simply. I don't take what isn't mine. Even when you need it? His voice was softer now, almost curious. I can hear it in your voice, Miss Joseph. You're tired. You work multiple jobs. You thought about keeping that money, didn't you? Just for a moment. Mary's throat tightened. How did he know all that from a 30-second conversation? Yes, I thought about it. I'm not going to lie. But thinking and doing are different things. Indeed they are. Kim Ming exhaled, and Mary heard what might have been approval. Where are you now? Still in the suite. I'm finishing my shift. Stay there. Don't leave the room. Don't tell anyone about the portfolio. Someone will come for it within 20 minutes. I can just leave it at the front desk and... No. The word was sharp, commanding. You will hand it to my associate directly. You will wait. Do you understand? Mary's instincts screamed that something was wrong, that normal people didn't handle lost wallets like covert operations. But she'd already made her choice when she picked up the phone. I understand. Good. And Miss Joseph? Thank you for your honesty. It's rarer than you might think. The line went dead. Mary sat on the edge of the pristine bed, the portfolio in her lap, and tried to calm her racing heart. 20 minutes. She checked her watch. It was 12:17 a.m. The hotel was quiet, most guests asleep, the hallways empty. She thought about calling her supervisor, but what would she say? A guest told me to wait in his room for a mysterious associate? That sounded insane. So she waited. At exactly 12:35 a.m., there was a soft knock at the door. Not the aggressive housekeeping knock Mary used, but a controlled, almost polite tap. She opened the door and found herself looking up at a man who could have been carved from stone. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing a dark suit that probably cost more than her car. His face was impassive, his eyes cold and assessing. Mary Joseph, he said. Not a question. Yes. He held out his hand, palm up. Mary placed the portfolio in it. He didn't open it, didn't check the contents. He simply gave a slight nod and reached into his jacket. Mary's heart lurched, some primitive part of her brain screaming danger. But what he pulled out wasn't a weapon. It was an envelope. Plain, white-sealed. From Mr. Kim, the man said. His voice was flat, professional, completely devoid of warmth. He asked me to convey his gratitude. He placed the envelope in her hand, nodded once more, and left. The entire interaction had lasted less than 30 seconds. Mary stood in the doorway, listening to his footsteps recede down the hallway, impossibly quiet for a man his size. She looked down at the envelope. It wasn't sealed with glue, but with a small wax seal, dark blue, pressed with some kind of symbol she didn't recognize. Her hands trembled as she broke it open. Inside was cash. A lot of cash. Mary counted it twice, sure she'd made a mistake. $2,000 in crisp $100 bills. And beneath the money, a note on heavy cardstock, handwritten in elegant script. Miss Joseph, integrity is the rarest currency in this city. You have demonstrated yours without expectation of reward. Accept this with my gratitude. What you do with it will tell me everything I need to know about who you are. We will speak again. Kim Ming. Mary read the note 3 times, trying to parse the meaning. What you do with it will tell me everything I need to know. That wasn't gratitude. That was surveillance. That was continued assessment. She wasn't done being tested. She'd just passed the first round. Her phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. Your mother's prescription refill is at Mercy Pharmacy. Paid in full. Get some sleep, Miss Joseph. You've earned it. If you're still watching, you probably feel that chill too. That moment when gratitude turns into something deeper, darker. What would you do if a powerful stranger rewarded your honesty like this? Money, favors, and quiet surveillance. Would you walk away? Or see how far the rabbit hole goes? Drop your thoughts in the comments. And don't forget to hit that like button if Kim Ming's test just pulled you in. Mary stared at her phone's screen until the words blurred. He knew about her mother. He knew about the prescriptions. Kim Ming had researched her, investigated her life, probably within minutes of her phone call. The $2,000 in her hand suddenly felt like a chain rather than a gift. She should have been terrified. Part of her was. But another part, the exhausted part that had been running on fumes and faith for 3 years, felt something else. Relief. For the first time in months, she didn't have to choose between her mother's medication and her own tuition payment. She didn't have to calculate which bill could wait another week. Mary looked at the note again. We will speak again. It sounded like a promise and a threat wrapped in expensive paper. She went home that night and didn't sleep. Instead, she sat at her tiny kitchen table and stared at the money, the note, and her phone. She thought about her mother's voice, about integrity and clear consciences. She thought about the way Kim Ming had known she was tired, had known she worked multiple jobs, had somehow obtained her mother's prescription information in less than an hour. This wasn't a random act of gratitude. This was something else entirely. Something calculated and purposeful. But what? The next morning, Mary went to her nursing clinical rotation on 3 hours of sleep and too much coffee. She moved through her shift on autopilot, checking vitals, updating charts, assisting the floor nurses with patient care. Her clinical instructor praised her thoroughness, her calm bedside manner, her steady hands. Mary smiled and nodded and thought about a stranger's blood-stained money and a handwritten note that felt like a contract she didn't remember signing. 3 weeks passed. Mary heard nothing from Kim Ming. No calls, no texts, no mysterious associates appearing in hotel hallways. She used the $2,000 carefully. Half went to her mother's medical expenses. The other half she saved, tucking it away like emergency insurance, refusing to touch it unless absolutely necessary. The money felt marked somehow, like it came with invisible strings. She changed her shifts at the hotel, choosing floors and times that seemed safer, less likely to result in mysterious encounters. She was more careful now, more aware of the cameras in the hallways, the guests who lingered too long in the lobby, the black cars with tinted windows that seemed to appear more frequently outside her apartment building. Maybe she was paranoid. Maybe Kim Ming had moved on, had forgotten about the tired housekeeper who returned his money. Maybe this was over. Then her mother's vision suddenly worsened. Emergency surgery, the ophthalmologist said. Detached retina, high risk, needs to happen within the week. Cost, $12,000, not covered by her basic insurance. Payment required up front. Mary sat in the hospital financial counselor's office and felt the world tilt beneath her. $12,000. She had maybe $3,000 in savings if she liquidated everything. She could take out a private loan, but the interest rates would bury her. She could drop out of nursing school, pick up more shifts, but that felt like surrendering the only future she'd been working toward. She walked out of the hospital in a daze, her phone clutched in her hand. She stood on the sidewalk, watching people pass by, living their normal lives with their manageable problems. And then, without really deciding to do it, she opened her contacts and found the number that had texted her 3 weeks ago. She typed, "I need help." The response came in less than a minute. Address? Mary sent her location. She didn't ask how he would help or what it would cost. She was drowning and someone had thrown her a rope. You don't negotiate with rope. A black sedan pulled up to the curb 15 minutes later. The same stone-faced associate from the hotel emerged from the driver's seat and opened the back door. Mary got in without hesitation. Kim Ming was sitting in the back seat, and seeing him in person for the first time felt like touching a live wire. He was younger than she'd imagined, maybe early 30s, with sharp features and dark eyes that seemed to see everything. He wore a charcoal suit that fit him perfectly, and there was something about his stillness that suggested coiled power. "Miss Joseph," he said, and his voice was exactly as she remembered. Smooth, controlled, dangerously calm. "You need help." It wasn't a question. Mary met his eyes and refused to look away. "My mother needs surgery. $12,000. I don't have it. You could have asked your employer for an advance." You could have applied for medical financing. Instead, you contacted me. He tilted his head slightly. Why? Because you told me we'd speak again, Mary said. Because you paid for her prescriptions without me asking. Because I think you've been waiting for this. Something flickered in Kim Ming's expression. It might have been respect. You're perceptive. Yes, I've been waiting. The question is whether you understand what you're asking for. I'm asking for help paying for my mother's surgery. No. Kim Ming leaned forward slightly. You're asking to enter into a relationship with me. A professional relationship that will require something more valuable than money. It will require trust, discretion, and absolute loyalty. Mary's pulse hammered in her throat. What kind of professional relationship? I'm a businessman, Miss Joseph. I have interests that require certain services. You're a nursing student, almost finished with your degree. You have steady hands, a clear head, and most importantly, you have integrity. People with integrity are useful to me because they can be trusted. Trusted to do what? Kim Ming pulled out a tablet and slid it across the seat to her. On the screen was a contract, dense with legal language. To provide medical services when and where I need them. Discreetly. Without questions. Without records. Mary's blood went cold. You want me to treat criminals. I want you to treat people who cannot afford to involve hospitals or police reports. People in my organization who get injured in the course of business. People who need help and can't get it through traditional channels. He paused. People like your mother, Miss Joseph. People who fall through the cracks of the system. This is illegal. No. Providing medical care is not illegal. Choosing not to report the circumstances of an injury is a gray area. One that many private physicians navigate regularly. Kim Ming's voice softened slightly. I'm not asking you to hurt anyone. I'm asking you to help them. Isn't that what you want to do? Help people. Mary looked at the contract on the screen, then back at Kim Ming. And in exchange? Your mother's surgery. Paid in full. Your remaining tuition. Paid in full. Your student loans. Eliminated. A stipend of $3,000 per month while you finish school. And when you graduate, a guaranteed position at a private medical facility I own, with a salary triple what you'd make at a public hospital. The numbers made Mary's head spin. It was everything she'd been working toward, handed to her on a silver platter. Financial freedom. Her mother's health secured. Her future guaranteed. All she had to do was ignore where the injuries came from and who the patients were. Why me? Mary asked. You could hire any doctor. You could have people with more experience, more credentials. Because you called me at midnight to return $8,000 you desperately needed, Kim Ming said simply. Because when I tested you, you passed. I don't need experienced doctors, Miss Joseph. I have those. I need someone clean, someone unknown, someone who isn't already compromised by the system. Someone I can trust. Mary looked out the car window at the hospital where her mother was waiting for news about her surgery. She thought about the crushing weight of debt, the exhaustion that had become her constant companion, the future that felt like it was slipping further away every day. She thought about integrity and clear consciences and sleeping sound at night. Then she thought about her mother going blind because she couldn't afford $12,000. If I say yes, Mary said slowly, what happens if I want out later? Then you leave. The contract has an exit clause. But the money I invest in you must be repaid. Not in cash. In time. 3 years of service. After that, you're free to go with my blessing and no obligations. Kim Ming's eyes held hers. But I don't think you'll want to leave, Miss Joseph. I think once you see what I can offer you, you'll realize this is the opportunity you've been waiting for. Mary's hands trembled as she picked up the tablet. She read through the contract carefully, her nursing school training making her methodical even in crisis. It was exactly as he'd described. Medical services, discretion required, no obligation to participate in illegal activities, exit clause after 3 years of service. The compensation was staggering. The terms were clear. It was a deal with the devil, except the devil was offering her everything she'd ever wanted. She thought about her mother's voice. Easy money always costs the most. But was this easy money? Or was this compensation for work she was qualified to do? Where was the line between compromise and survival? I need one thing, Mary said finally. I need to know that I'm helping people. That I'm not participating in violence. That my work is still about saving lives. You have my word, Kim Ming said. You will save lives, Miss Joseph. You will help people who have nowhere else to turn. Some of them may be criminals. Some of them may have done terrible things. But when they're bleeding in front of you, They're just patients. And you will do what you were trained to do. You will help them. Mary looked at the contract one more time. Then she looked at Kim Ming, this dangerous stranger who'd somehow become her only lifeline. She pressed her thumb to the signature pad on the tablet. "My mother's surgery," she said. "When can it happen?" Kim Ming smiled for the first time, and it transformed his face into something almost warm. "I'll make the call now. She'll be in surgery by tomorrow morning." And Mary, he used her first name deliberately, establishing a new intimacy. "Welcome to my organization. I think you're going to do extraordinary things." The car pulled away from the hospital, and Mary watched through the window as her old life receded into the distance. She'd made her choice. She'd signed her name. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she heard her mother's voice one more time, not in warning but in sad resignation. "Easy money always costs the most, baby girl." Mary closed her eyes and wondered what the final price would be. If you're invested in Mary's story and want to see what happens next, hit that subscribe button and drop a comment below telling us what you would have done in her situation. Would you have taken the deal? Let's discuss. 6 months later, at 3:47 in the morning, Mary's specialized phone rang for the first time. The ringtone was sharp and unmistakable. She grabbed it on the second ring. Already pulling on the scrubs she kept ready by her bed. Kim Ming's voice was tight with controlled urgency. "Car outside. 5 minutes. Bring your medical kit. Gunshot wound. Critical." "Where?" Mary was already moving, checking her kit, pulling her hair back. "You'll see when you arrive." "Mary," his voice dropped lower. "This is my brother. Don't let him die." The line went dead. Mary made it downstairs in 4 minutes. The black sedan was idling at the curb, exhaust white in the cold morning air. She climbed in, and they drove in silence through empty streets, out of the city, onto private roads she'd never seen before. Her heart hammered, but her hands were steady. This was what she'd trained for. This was what she'd signed up for. The mansion appeared suddenly, huge and isolated, surrounded by walls and gates. They took her through an underground entrance, down corridors that smelled of money and secrecy, until they reached a room that looked like a private surgical suite. Kim Ming was there, his usual composure fractured, his shirt sleeves rolled up, blood on his hands. On the table was a man in his late 30s, unconscious, breathing shallow, a gunshot wound in his upper abdomen, leaking dark blood despite the pressure bandages someone had applied. Mary didn't hesitate. She moved to the table, assessed the patient with clinical efficiency, and began issuing calm, clear instructions. Kim Ming became her assistant, following her orders without question, handing her instruments, monitoring vitals, completely focused on saving his brother. 2 hours later, the bleeding was controlled, the wound cleaned and sutured, the patient stable. Mary's scrubs were stained with blood, her muscles aching from sustained concentration, but her hands were still steady. Kim Ming looked at her with an expression she'd never seen before. Raw relief mixed with something deeper. Gratitude. Trust. Possession. "You saved him," he said, and his voice cracked slightly on the words. Mary finally allowed herself to meet his eyes. And in that moment, she understood the truth she'd been avoiding for 6 months. She wasn't just an employee. She wasn't just a useful asset. She was his. Bound by more than a contract, more than money, more than professional obligation. She'd saved his brother's life, and in doing so, she'd sealed her own fate. The debt between them had become something neither of them could ever fully repay. And just like that, everything changed. Mary wasn't just part of Kim Ming's world anymore. She belonged to it. A life saved. A line crossed. A debt that tied two hearts in ways neither could undo. If you've made it this far, thank you for watching. What do you think? Is this the end of their story, or just the beginning of something darker and more dangerous? Drop a comment if you want to see part 2 of Mary and Kim Ming's story. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and share if you're already hooked.